townsfolk of Temperance huddle in their homes, trembling in the dark. They sit beneath windows clutching their prayer beads and muttering desperately to a god they hope is still out there. There's no light in the town, no breeze either, just the slow, rhythmic boom of colossal footsteps. The deputy stands with his back to the wall, not daring to look out of the next window. On the table is a dusty old glass of water. Each footstep sends ripples across its surface. He clenches his jaw, grips his rifle, and stares at the glass as the ripples get stronger and stronger. What curse had befallen this town? What grievous sin had taken place here that had heralded the arrival of these demons? A shadow passes across the window. The deputy presses himself even harder against the wall, closing his eyes and trembling. The footsteps are so loud now that he feels the earth shaking beneath him. A photograph of him and his ma falls to the floor. The deputy dives for it with his hand. He prays into his bloody fist that the demon outside doesn't hear. But the footsteps stop. The shadow that had passed by the window returns. He hears the sound of breathing, loud as a pair of bellows, right against the other side of the window pane. In the reflection of the shards of the broken photo frame lying there, he sees it. An eye the size of his head, demonic and hungry, staring through the window just feet away from himself. If he'd had any courage, he'd turn around now and shoot the demon right in the eye. But all that happens instead is a warm, damp patch spreading across his denims. Outside in the street, a commotion kicks up. Voices yell and holler, and then, in a split second, the shadow is gone from the window. The deputy lets himself have just a second to catch his breath and come to terms with the fact that he's still alive, before that familiar sinking feeling tugs at his stomach. He wheels around to look out of the window in horror. The preacher man and several of his congregation have run out of the open church doors, waving around their crucifixes and rosary beads. At the top of their lungs, they chant prayers at the demon, running this way and that in an attempt to surround it. But before they can do anything, their fervent prayers are drowned out by an ear-splitting, ferocious roar. Then, the Tyrannosaurus Rex lunges at the preacher man. Talk of the rapture had never been far from people's lips in the town of Temperance, Montana. Living out in the Wild West in a town of just 40 souls, out here often felt like the destruction of the world had already come. Surrounded by the Montana boonies, with only the occasional trader or Roman pack of bandits passing through, it was entirely possible that the destruction of the world had happened, but God had forgotten to send any angels out to Temperance. Until the Flash happened. That's what the townsfolk called it, the Flash. Everybody, men, women, and children, all reported experiencing the exact same thing at the exact same time, a white light filling their vision. They'd all then stepped out onto their porches, squinting into the summer sun, trying to work out what on earth had happened. The deputy remembered the moment clear as anything. That was the moment he looked out and realized they weren't in Montana anymore. The dry grasslands around them were gone. The shape of them was still there, sure, but the grass was gone, the air was different, and the sky was heavier. All around them, trees had sprung up. Not just young trees, mind you, but tall, luscious ones with a thick undergrowth surrounding them. It felt humid. The air was almost richer, so rich that you breathe in and go a bit lightheaded. That was when one of the townsfolk started screaming. The deputy rushed over to help, but by the time he got there, it was too late. The body was already dead. In total, 6 people died during the flash. Old Pete, Mary, and all 4 of Annette's descendants. Most of the chickens were also dead. And one of the horses was slumped on the ground outside the saloon, its head half floating in the water trough. No one could quite figure out what it was that had killed him, and why everyone else was alive. But even those that made it felt pretty rough. Heads pounding, mouths dry, with waves of dizziness overtaking them, staggering for the rest of the day. The deputy tries his best to recount these events in his journal. He was never much of a scholar, only learning to read when he was 17, but he's 19 now, and steadily getting better with his words. He racks his brain as he sits at the desk trying to make sense of the day he's had, while also remembering which squiggly shape makes which sound. This here feels important to him. Even though he wants nothing more than to go to bed, he knows he needs to get it all down so no one forgets. Outside his window, he hears the sound of the townsfolk. Many of them had been theorizing all day that they've wound up in paradise, that their God has seen their good, hard work in this town fit for his kingdom, and chosen them to be the first to arrive in the Garden of Eden. The deputy himself was quite optimistic, seeing the lush greenery all around him. It was only after a chat with the sheriff that he started to see the gravity of the situation. He clears his throat just as the clock on the wall chimes. It's time to do the job he's been dreading all evening. The deputy gets up from the table, walks over to the back door, and picks up the shovel. These bodies ain't gonna bury themselves. The sheriff calls a town meeting the next day. As expected, it devolves into pure chaos. Some are overwhelmed with paranoia, while their neighbors are convinced that they have arrived in heaven. In all the commotion, no one pays attention to one of the farmhands who tries his best to tell everyone that his chickens are missing. Having barely slept and trying his best to overcome a splitting headache, the deputy decides to go out and help this young boy. Anything to get out of the chaos at the town hall meeting. The boy leads him round back to the chicken coop and tries his best to explain what's happened. The kid still struggles a bit with his English, but the deputy knows enough Spanish to bridge the gap. At the start of the previous day, there had been 20 chickens. When the flash happened, 8 of them had died. The kid gestures to the coop, and the deputy looks around, puzzled at what his companion is getting at. But sure enough, the boy's right. Something's off. There should be 12 chickens left, but they only count 6. He asks the boy in broken Spanish what he'd done with the bodies of the chickens that had died the previous day. The boy explains to him that he had piled them up around the side of the barn in case they'd been sick or contaminated somehow. He goes to show the deputy around the corner, except as the pair of them look, there's nothing there. Nothing except a giant footprint in the dirt. The deputy crouches by it, feeling more confused than ever. There's no coyote track, not even a bear. It's larger than both of these, but it's not the size that confuses him the most. It's the shape. If he didn't know any better, he'd think the print was left by a single, giant chicken. Over the following week, it's a steady battle for the deputy and the sheriff to rein in the chaos that's descending over the town. Without their animals and the usual trade coming through the town, food supplies are starting to run thin. On top of that, the sheriff institutes the rule that no townsfolk are allowed to leave the perimeter of the town until they have a better handle on what's going on. This doesn't go down well with a lot of people. One group in particular, who'd just been passing through the town when the flash happened, decides to take off in the middle of the night, stealing one of the few remaining horses in an attempt to get away. No one knows entirely what happened to him, but the deputy, on his morning walk the day after, spots an abandoned carriage about a mile or two away with its horse missing. They'd forgotten some of their things in their haste to run away, including a stack of dynamite. Safe to say, they didn't make it very far. The sheriff, in an attempt to quell some of the rebellions that were kicking off across the town, says he'll go on a scouting mission, taking 2 other men and the only horse left with him. The sheriff heads out, leaving the deputy in charge. The 19-year-old man sure doesn't feel like he's in charge, though, as the days tick by. Fights break out on an almost daily basis. Most of the time, the deputy doesn't even know who's in the right. So one night, when the preacher man tiptoes into his room and shakes him awake in the early hours of the morning, the deputy damn near shoots his head off in fright. Wordlessly, the preacher man pulls him over to the window and points out into the darkness, in the direction of the shallow graves they dug for the people who died on the day of the flash. The deputy's stomach turns. What can only be described as a demon is digging at the graves. 8 feet tall and shrouded in darkness, it has a body like a snake, but with a powerful pair of back legs and a twisting tail. Its head is normal, with eyes that glint red even in the dark of night. It's chomping and chewing at the open grave, swallowing whole parts of the man buried there. With trembling hands, the deputy fetches his rifle, pushes open the window, and takes aim at the monster. The crack of a gunshot and a flash of light interrupt the darkness. The creature half turns and then goes back to its meal, clearly unconcerned. A puff of dust at its feet tells him that he'd missed his first shot. He steadies himself and fires again and again, this time managing to hit it. The demon hisses and turns to him in frustration, barking and yelling in a strange kind of voice, before turning and going back to its meal. It just took the rifle round to its thigh, as if it was nothing. As soon as he saw that, the deputy didn't feel like firing his gun anymore. Chaos had been bubbling for the recent few days. The following morning, it boils over. The deputy, voice hoarse from shouting, tries and fails for the whole day to contain the hysteria of the mob. First thing in the morning, as soon as he had been certain that the demon was gone, the preacher had run around the hotel telling everyone exactly what happened. Now, rather than believing they'd been transported to the Garden of Eden, the townsfolk are certain they've arrived in hell. It came to a point where there was nothing more the deputy could do. He shut himself into his house and just waited out the storm. The mob soon fell silent, however, as three figures wandered back into town. The sheriff, along with the two men he'd taken with him. He explained in a voice too exhausted to sugarcoat the truth that they had met an enormous reptile the size of a house, which had taken the horse from right next to him and tossed it up into the air as if it were nothing more than a rat. And it was only a matter of time before that enormous predator found its way into their town. And sure enough, that night came. The deputy trembles, standing next to his window, staring at the dinosaur through the reflection in the broken photo frame. It's monstrous, and it stares at him. Then the commotion breaks out. The preacher man and several of his congregation run out of the church building, waving their crucifixes and prayer beads, chanting and singing, and trying to surround the monster. The deputy rushes out of the building just in time to see the T-Rex lunge at the preacher man. It could have swallowed him whole very easily, but it chooses not to. Instead, sinking its teeth into him and tossing him up in the air before catching him and chewing him, still screaming all the while. All the bravery, all the fight, suddenly leaves the congregation as they turn around and run for their homes. But by now, it's too late. The hunter is hunting. Running after them with thunderous footsteps, it catches them one by one, sweeping them up into its jaws and sending red spattering across the fronts of all the homes and the church itself. Gunfire breaks out all around the square. The deputy realizes he's just been standing there doing nothing, and so loads his rifle and starts shooting at the beast as well. The bullets prick at its thick hide, not even drawing blood. The flashes and the sounds seem to be enough to rile the monster up further. It starts to swing its colossal tail, smashing it into buildings, sending splintered wood and shattered glass flying across the square. Then, out of one of the buildings, bursts the sheriff. With a steely look of determination on his face, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a bundle of dynamite. He roars at the top of his voice. It sounds pitiful and tiny in comparison to the creature standing before him, but it's enough to get its attention. The T-Rex turns and lumbers towards him, mouth salivating and tongue lashing. The sheriff seems to know what he has to do. He nods once to his deputy across the square before lighting the fuse. He runs forward and jumps into the T-Rex's mouth, arm outstretched before him. The explosion is so bright, it's almost like the flash has happened a second time. An unimaginable boom rips through the entire town, shaking the glass windows in their frames. When the dust clears, the creature is dead. It lies in the dirt, bloody and still. The townsfolk just stand around and stare, until one of the kids turns to the deputy. "Now what?" SCP-4003 is the blanket designation for the town of Temperance, located near Jordan, Montana. Efforts are ongoing to scrub any mention of the town from existence, but the Foundation has discovered plenty of references that verified its existence throughout history. The town contains a saloon, sheriff's office, trading post, general store, church, and domestic buildings along its main street. Its earliest mention was in the journals of a gold rush miner in 1859. It is safe to say that the small town had very little part to play in the broader history of the United States. That is, until its disappearance. One day in November 1866, the town of Temperance, Montana, vanished. Or at least it did to those from outside of the town. For anyone unlucky enough to be in the town on the day of its disappearance, they would have found themselves transported back to the Cretaceous period, roughly 66 million years ago. Investigations are ongoing as to what caused this temporal shift. There are a number of theories linking the events of SCP-4003 to other SCP phenomena, such as SCP-3834. Piecing together the events that took place following the town's displacement is difficult. The town was discovered deep underground in 1871 by a gold miner. Initially, archaeologists believed that the remains were Neanderthal, but once it was discovered they were, in fact, Homo sapien, the SCP Foundation stepped in and administered hypnosuggestive agents to all those involved before setting up Site 1200 as the base of excavation. Officially, the mine and the town of Temperance do not and have never existed. While the town was transported back in time, it appears that it was not returned to its rightful place. Instead, it remained in place for millions of years, steadily being buried underground where the inhabitants were fossilized. That means that in the 1800s, when Temperance was constructed, it was actually being built about 200 feet above its fossilized future self from millions of years ago. Confusing enough for you yet? The town has wound up being an extremely useful resource for Foundation paleontologists. Over 50 dinosaur remnants have been discovered in and around the excavated town, including 2 Tyrannosaurus rex skeletons, though one of them is notably missing its head. The human remains appear largely consistent with having been underground for 66 million years, but there are a number of non-organic objects that appear to be in uncharacteristically good condition. A pair of revolvers have been recovered that are in very good condition for their ages. They have undergone the expected oxidization, and their wooden stocks have decayed away, but the metalwork appears to be in very good condition. There is also a silver crucifix that has been recovered in excellent condition, appearing newer than many similar such artifacts discovered just 300 years ago. But most interestingly of all is the safe that the Foundation recovered. Found in 2008, the safe has no signs of aging whatsoever. The iron components inside have not rusted at all. Inside, all of the items appear to be similarly anomalous. There are musket balls, revolver rounds, a rosary, daguerreotypes, and a journal apparently belonging to a man named Pendleton Tweed, a sheriff's deputy living in the town. This artifact was key in piecing together some of what happened in Temperance when it disappeared. While his entries are quite short, they paint a useful picture for the Foundation of what took place. Over the course of 2 weeks, the town was steadily ravaged by a number of dinosaurs with increasing severity. Accounts point to the presence of raptors, triceratops, and, of course, a dramatic showdown with the Tyrannosaurus rex. Quite how long the townsfolk survived after this incident is still unknown. There are only 2 entries following the events of the sheriff's death when fighting the colossal dinosaur. In each, Deputy Tweed appears to be growing steadily more religiously devout. He writes prayers to God and documents religious experiences where he feels he is getting closer to his creator. The ultimate entry talks about him going outside, looking up at the sun, and feeling God's presence with him. Researchers have theorized that none of the townsfolk would have survived for long beyond this point, as the effects of oxygen poisoning set in, as they were breathing an atmosphere much richer in O2 than their bodies were built for. This, coupled with the threat of the megafauna surrounding them, as well as limited supplies of food and potable water, spells a grim prognosis for the population of Temperance. The dig site remains securely protected by the Foundation, which uses it as an opportunity to examine dinosaur remains and gain greater knowledge about our giant extinct neighbors. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-4198, the Black God Chernobog.